Good morning. This is Mary de la Barca, and today is January 14th, 2019, and we are here at El Paso Cookies Inc. with
Sally Schwartz.
Sally Schwartz. We're going to be gathering your oral history, part of your life story through the lens of food.
Cool.
Okay. So just for the record, to start off, you please tell us your name, where you're born, and
Well, see, my maiden name is Burkhart, which is German. So I'm basically, I don't know, a lot of German, mostly German. And I was born in Tularosa, New Mexico, February 6, 1969, so I'm about to turn 50.
yeah.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. And I grew up in between El Paso, Cloudcroft, Ruidoso, Albuquerque, kind of all the way up to Santa Fe. That's my stomping ground from El Paso to Santa Fe and all around, yeah.
Okay. Your parents, what are they?
My mom is from El Paso. She was actually born in Monahans by Midland, and then, but she's been here ever since she was a toddler, I believe. And yeah, so she, I think she went to Austin High School. Oh my gosh, I should really ask her. And and then she was also the first person in our family to go to college, and she became an RN when she was 40. And then she was a nurse until like 67. I think she was 67 when she retired. So she's recently retired.
Okay.
And she's knitting and taking sewing classes and cooking at home. Yeah.
And your father?
Well, my biological father is from southern New Mexico, and he still lives there, and he had a couple of tours in Vietnam, so he's kind of still recovering from that, I believe. And but it's my understanding that he did like a lot of work with like water wells and that sort of thing. So.
Did you grow up in El Paso or Tularosa?
El Paso, yeah.
Okay.
But I would go to Tularosa like for feast days, because I was born on the reservation there, but I'm not Apache, but a little bit of Apache. It's a long story. So like my biological dad is half, and then my grandmother was half. My biological dad was like 1/16th, I think. However that works, the whole one drop rule thing or whatever. So I was allowed to like go to feast days and stuff like that with my grandmother's permission, and it's a process when you want to try to get on the reservation.
So most of your life you lived here in El Paso?
Yeah, most of my life I lived here, yes.
But have you been here all of your life, or have you moved away?
Oh, no. See, I was here. Okay, so how did all of this happen? So I was born in Tularosa, and I had grandparents in Alamogordo and Cloudcroft, and then I had grandparents here in El Paso, and my mom and my aunt and my uncle and my cousins lived here on my mom's side. So most of the time I grew up here. Sometimes I would be in Ruidoso or Cloudcroft or Tularosa, kind of depending on what was going on in the family at the time. So I did go to school, like elementary school. I would go to school here and there, kind of back and forth. That makes sense. Yeah. So.
And college?
College, I started out at EPCC, and I did all my basics there, and then I transferred to UTEP, and I went there for 3 semesters, and then I think I was going through the I want to do what I want the way I want to do it. And my mom was basically riding me like a horse in college because she wanted me to be successful. And she didn't want us to know what it felt like to be hungry or poor or anything like that. So, but I'm also an artist. She's not an artist. She's more of a scientist. And so I just wanted to like do my own thing. And so I moved to Albuquerque, and I transferred to UNM. And I also had like an opportunity there where I had an opportunity for more scholarships and stuff.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Mhm.
I took advantage of that.
Okay. And after some time, obviously, you came back to El Paso. What brought you back to El Paso?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I was in Albuquerque for 10 or 11 years, and then I met my second husband at the time, and his job kind of moved us around. He wasn't military, but he worked for a resort hotel company, and so we had to move to Nashville, and then we had to move to Kissimmee, Florida, and then we had to move to Washington, D.C., and then we moved to Dallas. So this is like his job. We're just like traveling all the time. And so, and then what brought me back home a couple of years ago is I decided to separate and file for a divorce. And I was like, peace out, yo. Catch you on the flip side. I'm going home. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have children?
Yes, I have 2 children. Brandon Yakov is 33, and my daughter Emily is 29.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, I also became pregnant in high school. I was a pregnant teenager, and I had Brandon at 17 and Emily at 21.
Wow. Wow. So let's talk a little bit about food.
Okay.
Where does your interest with food begin? Or where can you place it?
I was really trying to think really hard about that, but all I remember is that there was, no matter whose house I was in, there was always something cooking.
Mhm.
Yeah, always. Like there's always something going on, or both of my grandmothers cooked a lot, and then my Aunt Gladys and my mom. I can't really remember not having like smells coming from the kitchen, whether it's like coffee or bacon and eggs in the morning or chili or anything, you just potatoes. My Aunt Stephanie, she always made this like potato and bacon soup.
Mm-hmm.
Always, like it's a family classic. So there's always something to eat, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of difficult for me to like really place something. I just remember smelling everything all the time. And I remember I think my Aunt Stephanie really had like a huge role to play in my cooking development, because I would go in the kitchen and be like, what is that? Oh, why do you have that huge onion in there? Oh, well, when the onion is, after it cooks down and it's translucent, then that means the chilies are done. I was like, oh, all right, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I understand that you have a bachelor's, so you got that interest of smells, but I understand you have a bachelor's in culinary arts. And a master's, I believe, in
psychology of food. So it's not, I don't have a bachelor's in culinary arts. I have a bachelor's, it's in anthropology.
Okay.
So cultural and culinary anthropology from UNM, yeah. And so, much to my mother's dismay, I did not major in medicine or law. I was like, ugh. And I was like, I'm just not into it, And then I thought I was going to study painting, because like both of my grandmothers are painters and I'm a painter, and so I just thought, well, I'll just major in art. Like I was just like I said earlier, just kind of rolling around campus like la la la. Oh, a yoga class, cool. Like not really paying attention to things that, or not really making like a 5-year plan or something like that. But I just loved it. I had one anthropology course and I was hooked after that, and just like learning. Oh, and then I think the first like Jurassic Park movie had come out or something, and then like the scientist or whatever, she was all like, sifting through dino poop to see what they had eaten or whatever. She had studied like prehistoric botany or something, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I was like really interested in like what humans ate, you know, millions of years ago compared to what we eat now. How did it affect their family? How did it affect their teeth, their health, their brain development, and how is it affecting us now? And the way that we eat, it's vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just got hooked into that. And then I had a part-time job at there was this place in Santa Fe called the Coyote Cafe. And it was like in the 80s, 90s, and it was a big deal. I didn't realize what a big deal this restaurant was because I was just like a little college student. I was really shy. You know, I just was kind of like an introvert, kind of into myself or whatever. But anyway, my friend got me this job at this restaurant, bussing tables on the weekend, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, and it was a good gig for me. And I had 2 little kids, and I was, you know, paying my bills with that. And then I went to work there when I think it was like a Friday or Saturday. So the saucier person never showed up. Don't know what happened. Have no idea. And then all of a sudden, the sous chef in that kitchen, he's like, you know how to cook a little bit? And I was like, I guess a little bit. You know, I wasn't really sure what he was talking about or what, you know, he needed or whatever. And because I had grown up in my aunt's cafe, Shetta Cafe, in like Anthony, Las Cruces, like on the border there. And Steph's Cafe. Steph's. And she was really well known for her green chili cheeseburger and her bounty burger and her burrito plate, and yeah. And so that was like in the 70s and 80s, way out there in the middle of nowhere. And she had people coming out there, like it was amazing. And she had a 2-acre garden. So that's kind of why I fell in love with the whole gardening thing. But anyway, so I got this little job. This guy doesn't show up to make the sauces. He pulls me in and he's like, this is how we make the red sauce and the green sauce. He's like, just follow this recipe. Just follow. And he was freaking out because service was about to start, and the sauces at that restaurant, or probably any fine dining restaurant, are like, you know, the whipped cream on your hot chocolate kind of thing. And but this one red chili recipe, I was like, oh my god, it's the same one. It's my aunt's recipe. I was like, I made this one before. I can do this, you know. And I was just I was like sweating bullets. I was the only girl in the kitchen, so I did not want to make a mistake. I was just like, and all these guys in the kitchen, they're just looking at me like, you know, like, because I was young and they're all like these chef and cook types, and I was like, I didn't know what was happening. But anyway, so I made like 4 sauces that night, and then after that I was a saucier there for like 2 years.
Wow.
Until I graduated. And then the owner, Mark Miller, he he ended up selling it and stuff like that. So, and then I ended up, you know, life's changed or whatever. So, but it was fun. Yeah, I got to do the Santa Fe thing for a little while. It was nice.
And then this is what you were getting your bachelor's, and then you went back to school and you got a.
That's why I was getting my bachelor's.
And then what led you to take a master's in the psychology?
Well, it's a master's in applied psychology with a focus in psychology of food.
Okay.
So it's one of those master's programs where you could major in something like under like the umbrella of arts and sciences and psychology, but then you could like fine tune what you wanted to study. So it was really nice for somebody like me who's like, I don't really like to follow the rules, and I like to do my own thing, but I still want to graduate or whatever. So when I finished there with anthropology, I went, there's like a university, Webster University, have you heard of that one? And so they're like in St. Louis, and so they have like a campus in Albuquerque, and I was like, well, this would be interesting. So I did some studies in Albuquerque, but I had to go to St. Louis a lot. I was kind of back and forth because the psychology of food professors were in St. Louis. So, but yeah, that was a really good program for me. And then like my thesis was about how chocolate affects the brain chemistry, the different types of chocolate. So you go from like raw chocolate, or how people used to just have the cacao and how it's processed and everything, and then what does milk chocolate do, what does dark chocolate do, what does cocoa butter do, you know, all of these things.
So which one do you recommend that we should consume more? Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate. But I also have a thing for abuelita chocolate. So, and I'm gonna get real like political here when I say, not Nestle. Sorry, Nestle, but not sorry. They know why. Because it's highly processed, and their practices are questionable. But the brand that I like to use is Ibarra. Yeah, and then because it's made in Mexico, it kind of has more of a traditional. I mean, they're still making it in somewhat of a factory, but they still, do it the old way for the most part. And then, but there's still people in Mexico that are like making it on the street, which is like, have you ever seen that happen? Oh my gosh, it's so fun, right? And so I when it comes to that, I'm incredibly stuck up. So our abuelita chocolate cookie that we have here is Ibarra, and I just, that's the only one that I let people use. So if I see Nestle in here, I get really angry. It's like, who brought this in here off with your head? Yeah.
Why dark chocolate?
Dark chocolate, actually, it's been proven that in our brain, it can help speed up the process of synapses. So it has like a natural occurring caffeine. If you drink coffee with your chocolate, then you're going to get more, what you would call like, oh, finally awake kind of feeling, or I can get moving with my day. And then it also helps with, when you're just kind of feeling like a little low, not necessarily depressed or anything, but just kind of like, kind of in the dumps, then it has a tendency to bring us out of that a little bit. So.
A minute ago, you mentioned you got hooked in gardening.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about gardening?
If you saw my garden right now, you would be like, this woman doesn't know what she's talking about. But it's fallow, and it's going through a compost process for the winter. So when I show it to you, just bear with me out there. But you'll be like, those pomegranates are crazy dried up. But I have always had a garden. I've always had access to a garden. So my my biological father's dad, my grandfather, always had this beautiful garden, And I call Frank my biological dad because I also have a stepdad who raised me, so it gets a little complicated. Life, there you go. And so, but my grandfather had this garden. It was crazy. Like, you'd walk out in the backyard, and like above or attached to the rock wall fence, he had all the squash like growing up, and then he had cucumbers, tomatoes, corn. He had like all of this corn on the side of the house. He had been raised on a farm and a ranch, and then when he went to World War II and came back, that's when everything started to change food-wise, and he found a job, and they bought a house, and so he turned this backyard into like an oasis of a vegetable garden. And one time I walked out there, and you would just trip over a watermelon. So there were just, plants were just everywhere. And then, like I said earlier, my aunt Stephanie, who had the cafe, she had a 2-acre garden out in Anthony for the restaurant. And we did like a lot of preserving and canning. Both of my families did a lot of canning and everything. So, yeah, but my aunt, I remember helping my aunt in the garden for her cafe, and it was a lot of work. a lot of work. Because, when okra is starting to, like, get ready to pick, you have to pick it, like, when it's about, like, 3 inches long. And if it gets too long, then the okra's going to be tough. And so your okra should always be, like, the little babies. And, but if they get, like, really long, then you just have to let those go to seed and plant those. So it's like, there's, like, a lot of timing. You have to be in the garden at a certain time to till, to plant, to water, to weed, to take care of everything. It's a constant, it's a job. Yeah. For sure.
I understand that you've worked in different kitchens with some perhaps well-known chefs. Can you tell us a little bit about who the chefs were, but mostly what were the experiences that you gained in terms of cooking in those settings?
Oh, wow. There's a lot. I think every chef wants to, like, work with good chefs or experienced chefs that they can learn from. And it's probably going to be surprising when I tell you who I learned from the most. But, so when I went to go work it was for Wolfgang Puck Catering and Wolfgang Puck 560, the restaurant in Dallas, and it, like, turns around, And I have, like, motion sickness. Yeah. And that restaurant would always make me nauseous when I'd go in there when it was, like, turning or whatever. And when I was working in the kitchen there, I was in pastry and writing happy birthday, anniversary, whatever on plates, just, like, all night long. Chocolate souffles, just, like, chocolate souffle batter, more souffle, just flying out all the time. And so when you're working on a wine like that, you learn how to work with all of the other cooks, and you have to make sure that you have everything you need. So if you could imagine, like, here was the counter, and then behind the counter, I'm over here in this corner, and there's an oven behind me, like at 450 degrees or whatever, and then you have the charcuterie cook was over here, and then a fry cook, and the sous chef and chef were kind of, like, going up and down. And then we had, at that particular restaurant, we had this big wok, because we had, like, a whole, like, deep fried wok fish, and his mouth would be open on your plate when they're, like, walking him out in the dining room or whatever. And so you just learn how to, like, communicate really well, communicate effectively, and then you're getting tickets out, and you're just learning how to form relationships with everybody that you're working with. And then you always have to keep it in mind that everything on the plate has to be perfect, because it's going out to somebody in the dining room who's having their golden anniversary or their 50th birthday or something like that. And so I always wanted to make sure that everything was perfect on that end. But that was what I learned on the restaurant, working for Wolfgang Puck, is that, on the line, you just have to be able to execute really well. But I also did the fine dining catering part, and so I was cross-trained between both of those. And so then for, like, the catering, you just had to do more communication. The recipes always had to be right. Sherry Yard, who was his executive pastry chef at the time, she was overseeing my pastry chef, and so it was just, it was like military, like, that recipe better be right or whatever. But at the same time, you kind of form a family with other chefs that you're working with or working for. It's, like what Anthony Bourdain would say is, when you're working in the kitchen, if you're like an instant family member, and that's basically how that works.
Yeah. You mentioned that I would be surprised. Who do you learn the most from? Who's that person?
Oh, that is Stephen Piles.
Stephen
Piles. And he is actually from Big Springs, Texas. And his family owned a couple of truck stops, like the diners at truck stops. And so he grew up I remember him telling me he would open up like a big, can of chili and put it in a pot and heat it up, and he's like, lunch, kind of thing. But at these truck stops or whatever, and he's like, and then he's like, I grew up, and he's like, there's more to there's more to food than just like canned food, But he is also known as the grandfather of Southwestern cuisine. So he has actually trained chefs like Mark Miller, who had Coyote Cafe, and he's worked with Wolfgang Puck on all kinds of stuff. Julia Childs, he's like a very more of a quiet kind of. I'm not really sure how to explain him. He if you met him, you'd be like, oh yeah, he has a lot of personality and charisma and stuff. But he's also not one to be like, oh, look at me, you know what I mean? He's not. He doesn't have that big flared ego. But he does have. He has the Flora Cafe in Dallas, Stampede 66, and then he had the signature Stephen Piles restaurant in Dallas, and so before that, so I had been working for Wolfgang Puck, and then the Compass Group was buying Wolfgang Puck out. He was retiring. There's all this transition stuff in the industry or whatever, and then this opportunity came up. My friend that I had been working with, she became the new executive pastry chef for Stephen Piles. And then she needed help, and she called me, and she's like, would you be willing to make a change or whatever? And I was like, I don't know. And then I did, and I was working at both places for a while, trying to decide. Because, most people, when you get in with Wolfgang Puck, you're not leaving.
So, we were.
Oh, I think we're talking about Gordon Ramsay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, usually when chefs get into work with chefs like Wolfgang Puck, you get into into their restaurants and their corporate lifestyle and everything. You don't really want to go. You're with Wolfgang Puck. Why would you want to work somewhere else, right? And so, and then for me, it was a really good working environment and very team oriented. A lot of people have different ideas about what a professional kitchen is. A true professional fine dining kitchen is not a crazy kitchen. There's no way that anybody would be able to run a kitchen if all of those stories out there were true in every single kitchen. I'm not saying that they're not true. In a lot of restaurants, a lot of chefs and cooks are drinking and doing things and getting through the next day or whatever, but in a true kitchen where you're a chef, you have to have it together. You have to be on top of your game, and you have to be able to create menu plans and expedite and supervise employees. And so when you hear all of those stories about, they were doing, cocaine or whatever, in some places, yeah, but in a real place, like Wolfgang Puck or Gordon Ramsay or anything, no. No, you don't. That's not the kind of people that they hire. And so, but Gordon Ramsay, a lot of people think that he's whatever his persona is on TV, but that guy has the lowest turnover rate in the industry. He does not lose cooks. He does not lose chefs. And they choose to stay with him because he takes really good care of them. So for me, I kind of come from that. I haven't worked for Gordon Ramsay, but I have friends who have and who do. And when you have a really good boss that has a really good company, you're not going to leave. So my goal with El Paso Cookie, even though right now we are a microscopic dot on the food industry map, microscopic, but my goal is to be an owner like that, to just take care of my business, my employees. You take care of your employees, and then they take care of your customers. So
and before we go back to El Paso Cookie Inn, you work in Dallas And then where else have you worked? Where all the cities?
Nashville.
Nashville.
That's a funny story. So, my husband at the time, he was working for a place called Gaylord Entertainment, and so they had like the Opryland and the what do we call it? It's like this huge Gaylord hotel, and it's like a 10-acre garden inside, like an atrium garden, and he's a garden designer, so he was like working in there, and so we moved to Nashville, and when you're from here, and you move there, you're just like, so I was not having an easy time there, just like, because for me it was a huge cultural shift, and I was homesick, and I couldn't find green chili anywhere. I couldn't find a jalapeno to save my life. I couldn't. There were just like certain things that I was like, I want to go home. You know, like I can't handle this. Biscuits and gravy. Like, what are you talking about? You know, and so. Anyway, one morning I was like, on my way to a job interview or something, and it was pouring down rain. The rain there is a lot different than here. Like, it'll just rain and then goes away. There, it just comes down in like these heavy, thick sheets of rain. You can't drive. You have to pull over. I was a hot mess. I didn't know where I was. We did not have GPS at that time. The cell phones were like, you know, kind of just making their way into the scene. And so I pull into this cafe that was just right there just to get a break from the rain, and I'm just like sitting in my car, and so the rain lets up a little bit. I go inside the cafe, and this lady, her name's Norma, she was there, and she's like, how can I help you? And I'm like, oh, I don't know where I am, I'm lost. I'm like trying not to cry. I'm like, I have to pick my daughter up from school in an hour and 15 minutes. I'm just like, what is going on? And she's like, you're not from here, are you? And I was like, no. I was like, how could you tell? And apparently they can tell because, you know, I don't have a southern accent or whatever. So she was like, you know, we just started talking. Anyway, she gave me my first slice of chess pie. Have you ever had chess pie? So it is really delicious. And chess pie. I'm not really sure why they call it chess pies. There's a lot of different stories out there that one person, it came out of the Civil War era. So people had like a little bit of sugar, some eggs, some cornmeal. They didn't have a lot, maybe a little bit of buttermilk, I think, but they didn't have a lot during those times, you know. So somebody made this pie. We don't know if it was named after somebody named Chess, if somebody was eating it while they were playing chess, like, you know, been trying to figure this out, never going to find out. Just Anyway, so chess pie. And some coffee. And I was like, whoa, I freaking love that chess pie. Totally fell in love with it. And so, but Nashville was the first place that we had moved after school. And then she asked me what I was doing, and I told her I was supposed to be on my way to a job interview, but I got lost, and I'm probably not getting that job. And she was like, well, what do you do? And I told her, and like, she just hired me right there. Yeah. So I learned how to make chess pie. I learned how to make really good biscuits. Really, really, really good biscuits, and I would never have learned to make those biscuits if I had not have ended up there in that rainstorm. You just never know, right? So, yeah, I worked there, and that was called the Loveless Cafe, and then I had no idea that that was a really well-known cafe there. I was like, yeah, but I was making like a lot of bread there. I just remember so many biscuits in my life at that time, and then gravy. And their gravy was like really thick, you know, like paste, like you could glue stuff with that stuff. And being like having experience as a saucier, I was just like, oh, I would do this a little bit differently, and so I helped out with the gravy situation, but then I also learned how to make chocolate gravy. So like that was kind of my introduction into Southern cooking, which I was completely clueless about. I had no idea. Like I'd heard of Southern cooking, but I feel like I learned from a true Southern cook while I was there. Yeah, and then just started learning how to work with different meats and smoked meats and pork and stuff. So.
And what other place have you worked? There was one more.
Kissimmee, Florida. Ugh, I didn't really like it there. Everything was like really commercialized, a lot of chains. It was hard to find a place to work that was kind of like a mom and pop kind of place. So there I kind of did different things, like more front of the house things. I had like more like organizing events and private dining and stuff like that because honestly I just couldn't find a kitchen there that I was really wanting to like work in and learn from, because I always feel like if I'm going to work in a kitchen I really need to be able to learn something that I don't know. And I was just doing event planning or like mostly like private dining, organizing for like a chain restaurant. So it wasn't that challenging. It was just like, but at the same time, my kids were like at that age where they needed a lot of my time too. So I was kind of like, my job was more like,
Talk to me a little bit about how much, from all these experiences you've had, how much this memory and the senses are key to cooking, or are they key to cooking?
Oh yeah, just like now, I went to taste test. She wanted to make sure that she had made the lunch correctly, and so I went to taste it, and the cabbage, and so it's braised cabbage with bacon, and I was just like, oh yeah, I remember that. That's from childhood. Yeah. So my Aunt Gladys, my great Aunt Gladys would braise cabbage with bacon, and I was like, and it just smells good, and it smells homey, and I don't know if I would say healthy. I don't know if something can smell healthy, but it just smells like comforting, you know? Yeah. And like, when people are eating food, like you want to eat something nutritious or you want to eat something sweet, but either way you're being nourished because like somebody made that for you or you made it for yourself and somebody else, and you're taking time to like, a little break enjoying your food. Play with your food, it's okay.
Play with it. Talk to us a little bit about El Paso cookie. How does this came about?
Wow. Yeah, that out of left field. Like I never saw it coming. Never really planned on it. I was always like planning on just staying with a chef and kind of I like being their right-hand person. I like being the person that they depend on to get things done. So like when I was in Fort Worth and working for Tim Love, he had like all of this crazy catering, right? So, and Wolfgang Puck had a lot of crazy catering. But when you're in charge of like organizing something, like even if it's like a piece of the puzzle, so like with Wolfgang Puck, we were catering the Super Bowl when it was in Arlington, and there was a snowstorm, ice storm, and all of like these seats had fallen down, and huge pieces of ice were just like falling off the stadium, and people were stuck in traffic, and it was just horrible. And like we were stuck at the stadium for like a few days. It was crazy. And but when I was accustomed to running shows like that, but with Tim Love, it was like he was like, here, he's like, I hired you. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know about it. He's like, I just want to know that it's done, because he has other stuff to do. So he just like handed me this ball, and here I am. I'm like, okay, I'm running pastry for all of his restaurants. I'm running pastry for all of his catering gigs, and these were huge things. These were like Chanel fashion shows and colonial golf tournaments and NASCAR stuff and the Austin Austin Food and Wine, and then ACL, like Austin City Limits, and so he was like feeding like all of the musicians and stuff. So there was just like a lot, you know, kind of things to learn. So, but what was the question?
So you brought that experience to El Paso cooking
I'm
in.
trying to bring that experience to El Paso, but with all of that supervisory experience that I gained from Tim, that was the one thing with all of the chefs that I've worked for. You know, we can always say, oh, this chef wasn't who I wanted to like work with, or they were this way or that way. You can be negative about them, but I do my best to like, I'm like, okay, what did I learn from that job? You know, Tim Love taught me how to sell, and he taught me how to market, and he taught me how to be brave, you know. And even though he and I didn't always see eye to eye on a lot of things, he taught me how to just do it. Just like get it done. And if it takes you 2 hours, if it takes you 29 hours, you know, he's kind of like Mark Cuban in that way. Like, you just go do it. It doesn't matter. No whining, no complaining, you know, put some icy hot on it and go, kind of thing. So, but when I started El Paso Cookie, basically I was just wanting to become like the next cookie queen, I guess. Because, you know, a lot of people, over the years, my cookies have always been well received, I guess you could say. And so I was like, okay, what does El Paso have? What does El Paso not have? So what had happened is I had moved back home. I was going through the divorce after 20 plus years or whatever. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I was like, okay, I need to go get a job. Well, I was basically I found myself in a situation where I was kind of overqualified for a lot of the restaurants that were here. And then, and they weren't doing the things that I had done before with like the fine dining catering. And so it's El Paso, it's my hometown. So I'm like, okay, I know where I'm at. I know, you know, what kind of job I can or can't get. So I just started making cookies at my parents' house, and I was going through, you know, what you would call like a transition, you know, like a huge major life transition. Like, I had been married for a really long time, then I decided to end that marriage, move back home, and just going through all of that, you know, just moving through. And so I just started baking cookies in the kitchen at my parents' house, and then my mom's like, oh, hey, I just, you know, there's like this farmer's market over, not the downtown one, but this one like at Time Montecito or whatever. She's like, just, you know, she's like, go over there. She was just giving me something to do. Let's go over there and see what we can do with your cookies or whatever. And that woman set up this crazy, she was unbelievable, my mom. She had these tables, and she had gotten this tent, and she told my dad, oh, you know, you do this, that, and the other, or whatever, her and her detail-oriented self, and we had, like, the cutest setup there, you know, I couldn't even believe it, and everything was just so sparkly and cute with these cookies, and then we just started selling cookies, and people were buying them, and I just did that for a while, and then my parents were like, you should open up your own place and see what happens. And my dad, he was like, yeah, he's like, the worst possible thing that could happen is you crash and burn. So what, you know? And then my aunt, she's like, Sally, it's really a lot of hard work, you know, because I was talking to people who own their own restaurants. I had grown up in a family restaurant. I remember seeing my aunt and my grandma at the dining table trying to figure out how they were going to pay quarterly taxes, you know? Like, I remember those moments that they didn't know I was watching or listening, but I was like, okay, it could be hard times, you know, and running a business is definitely a lot of work. So my plan was to be just make couture cookies for weddings, events, and then I wanted to sell cookies online and just kind of, you know, get the online thing going. And then I had scheduled my first wedding, and so they wanted, and it's because I had gotten to be the guest pastry chef, like when UTEP had their like centennial celebration thing, and what's her name, Liz, I think. She was like, oh, we need a pastry chef, and so they asked me to do it from Dallas, and my mom was like one of the alumni for nursing school, and so that went off without a hitch. Well, one of the people that were at that event, their daughter or whatever was getting married, and they had talked to like the caterer there. Anyway, that's how I got the deal with like the cake and the dessert table and everything. I was like, okay, this is cool. So 2 weeks before the wedding, the bride and the sister of the bride and the mother of the bride come in. The bride is crying. And I was like, oh gosh, I hope I didn't already screw up, because it would not be good. But I'm like, what's the matter? Did I do something wrong? Oh, no. The caterer that was going to do the dinner part has had a heart attack, and he's having an emergency quadruple bypass. And now we don't have a caterer for the wedding, for the food part, because we called all these other catering companies, and they're like, it's too short notice, can't do it, you know, for like 140 people. You know, it's just not enough time. And and she's like, can you do it? And I was like, yeah, okay.
Okay.
You know, I was like, wasn't sure how we were going to get it done. But then I was like, I'm gonna say yes, because I was just telling him the story about saying yes. I'll share that with you. And so we did it, and everything was okay. Like it flew. And then after that, all of a sudden I started getting a couple little catering things here and there, and then people wanted to eat here, and can you make me a sandwich, and do you have a salad? And then all of a sudden, boom, then I was like, okay, we had a breakfast menu, we had a lunch menu, we have a pizza menu, we have a takeout menu. Now online they can order gourmet meals to go, and you can, you know, call me up and say, hey, you know, I need fried chicken, or, you know, it's just really strange how this is evolving, you know. And and then the cooking classes. So I had a couple of vegan options on the board. I had a couple of people in my family who went vegan, not me, but I'm trying to accommodate, you know, people. And so I think I had like 3 vegan options, a couple of vegan cookies, called it a day with that. And then these 2 vegans are like, oh, we need to learn how to cook for ourselves, because we don't know what we're doing. And so we had a vegan cooking class, and then boom, now we have a cooking academy. So
wow. Of all these things you cook, is there one thing that you prefer to cook? Do you, some of your favorite things to do? Either cook or techniques or something that you really like using?
I love to cook everything. It kind of depends on what mood I'm in as to what I want to cook. So one day I might, like right now, I'm like, wow, that cabbage and bacon smells so good. Like I always want to make a huge pot of that or whatever. But sometimes I just get into like little moods. Like sometimes I'm in a pot pie mood, or I want to make a stew, or like it depends on what the weather is at the moment, or, you know, or if I get like an email notification, it's like, oh, romaine recall, don't serve any romaine, then I'm like, okay, I have to like think on my feet and make something else. So, but I think my favorite thing to do probably is, you know, preserving. I think preserving is probably my favorite. Canning, because all of those things that I make, like the preserved lemon is my favorite thing to make, and you can use that as an ingredient down the road. You know, salads, salad dressings, soups, sandwiches, or whatever. So I think that's like probably my favorite. But I also like to make cakes and, you know, prime rib. I don't know, just yeah, flambe. Like you know, like basically, I love to cook everything, and there aren't a lot of cooks out there, cooks or chefs who like to do pastry and savory. They're kind of hard to find, but I think it's just because that's how I was raised, you know, because we always had somebody in our family who did savory. We always had somebody in our family who did pastry or breads or whatever. And I was learning from all of them, doing everything. And I enjoy all of it. Anything in the kitchen, I'm down for. I think the one thing that got really shocked myself one time is we were doing the Fort Worth Food and Wine show or whatever, and I had to make some candy bars. And I was like, oh, how do I make candy bars? So I get that book right there, The Chocolates and Confections, and just picked out a recipe, and just like that one sous chef at Kyrie Cafe, he's just like, he's always in my head, just follow the recipe, you'll be okay, you know. Sometimes those recipes are really intricate and might have a tendency to like intimidate somebody, but with me, I'm like, no, Julia Child said, be brave, don't be scared, you know. Sharpen your knife, kind of thing, yeah.
As a chef owner, what have been some of how do you negotiate those two different roles? You know, what has been the joy and maybe a little bit of a challenge, but maybe most of the joy?
Yeah, most of it's a joy. Like cooking and teaching people how to cook. So like when we're having cooking classes, those are just so much fun, right? Like people can bring their own wine or their own beer. And we had one lady who scheduled a private cooking class for her entire family for their Christmas present. This was crazy, right? They wanted to learn how to make pasta, so they were making ravioli and fettuccine, and then we were making the corresponding sauces to go with that. And they all brought their own wine, and that was just the most fun. You know, they had like 12 people in here, and they had their grandmothers and their aunts and their cousins and their sisters and their brothers, you know, like it was amazing. And so that, I love the Cooking Academy. I love it. And I love cooking for customers when they come in and taking their orders and finding out what they want. Like right now we just like launched our gourmet gift boxes called Delivery. And Mabel, she just started with us, and she is doing marketing and design for like the gift boxes and event planning and stuff. So she's helping me with that. But these gift boxes were awesome because we had this one couple that were celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary, and we put everything that they wanted in their box, and everything was made from scratch. And so they were just like, you know, over the moon with their key lime pie. You know, her husband opened up the box. He's like, oh my gosh, there's a key lime pie in there. And they had chocolate covered strawberries and some of our candy bars and like a meat and cheese tray. So they're just different things. But it was like custom made just for them, you know. And I love that part. What I don't like is like when I have to leave the kitchen and, you know, and that could be to like run errands, go to the bank, make phone calls, or, you know, work on the computer, do whatever it is that I need to do. I'm like, ugh, I have to go sit down and do computer work, and then I have to like entrust somebody else to make sure that, like right now, like lunch for the daycare is going the way I would want it to be, and that's the hardest part for me. Yeah.
One final question. with all this experience that you have in food and all this lifelong relationship with food. In a few sentences, can you describe what food is or should be to all of us?
I think it should be available to everybody. I don't think that there should be one person on the face of the earth who doesn't have access to food at all. And I think that we should all have some type of garden to just complement our kitchen in some way. You know, even if it's just one little basil plant or one little rosemary plant, you know, you have something. You're like, oh, I have some of that, or mint or whatever. But that's basically what I feel that it should be available. And I just I get really upset when I see somebody not being able to get food. Like, to me, that's just like such a basic need with water. Like, it shouldn't be an issue. And not only should they be able to get food, anybody should be able to get food, you should be able to get good food that's made from scratch, not like this highly processed, you know, pop open a package and, you know. Have you tried those Rice Krispie treats that are pre-packaged? Nasty. Like, make a Rice Krispie treat. Make some marshmallows for your, you know, just learn how to, I want to be able to teach people to learn how to cook for themselves. You know, you can like give somebody a fish, or what is the saying? Give a man a fish and feed him for a day, but teach him how to fish and feed him for a lifetime. Like, I think, you know, I'm going that route. And I realize that El Paso Cookie is an unusual spot in El Paso. Everybody's like, what do they do over there? And then they ask me, what do you do over there? I'm like, I'm trying to figure it out. Like, what do we do over here? We do all kinds of things. And then I have people, they're like, oh, you need to like zoom in on something that works. And I'm like, well, everything that we're doing works for somebody. A cooking class will work for somebody. A gift box works for somebody. Somebody comes in for breakfast, that's working for them. So, you know, trying to just like pigeonhole it is really challenging.
Thank you so very much, Sally. This has
you.
been wonderful.
It is. Thank you.
Did I answer all your questions?
More than.
Oh, okay.
So we'll stop that. Stop this.
That's cool, because I don't